It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the only light in our Brooklyn loft came from the cold, harsh glow of a Mac Pro monitor. I stood leaning against the kitchen island, a cooling mug of black coffee in my hand, watching the most dangerous person I knew operate a mechanical keyboard. He was 5 years old. He was wearing fleece pajamas covered in tiny green tyrannosauruses, and he was currently glaring at the screen with a sharp, glacial intensity that made my chest physically ache, because it was the exact same expression Sebastian used whenever a boardroom negotiation was not going his way. "It is not moving." Papa Leo muttered, his voice barely a whisper in the quiet apartment. His small fingers, barely large enough to span a single octave on a piano, hovered over the trackpad. I set my mug down and walked over, resting a hand on his small shoulder. He leaned into the touch instinctively, but his slate gray eyes, Alexander's eyes, I had to force myself not to think about, that remained locked on the screen. Under the anonymous handle T-Rex, my 5-year-old son had just spent the last 3 weeks compiling a meticulously detailed, deeply damning video essay. It exposed 3 massive exploitative loopholes in the global supply chain network of Sterling Global. It was brilliant. It was undeniable. And he had just uploaded it simultaneously to Reddit and YouTube, expecting the internet to do what it does best: burn things down. I looked at the analytics dashboard. 0 views. Not 10, not 5, not even 1 accidental click. 0. "It is a shadow ban, Leo," I said quietly, the realization settling into my bones like a winter chill. The algorithm flagged the metadata before it even went live. Sterling Global's PR firewall is scrubbing it. Leo's jaw tightened. My code was clean. "Your code is perfect," I corrected him gently. "But they own the servers. They own the platforms. You cannot beat the house when the house writes the rules." He did not cry. Leo rarely cried. Instead, he just stared at that mocking 0, his small chest rising and falling in a way that felt far too heavy for a child. And looking at his frustration, looking at how easily a multi-billion-dollar empire could just erase his voice, something dark and dormant violently snapped inside me. It took exactly 47 seconds for 5 years of carefully constructed peace to shatter. Suddenly, I was not standing in a warm Brooklyn loft. I was 22 again, sitting in a sterile, glass-walled office in Manhattan. I could smell expensive leather and stale cigar smoke. I could see Richard Sterling, the patriarch of the Sterling Empire, sliding a blank check across the mahogany table with the practiced, terrifying gentleness of a man who crushed windpipes for a living. "Take it, Julian, or I will make sure you do not exist in this city. You are a distraction to my sons. You are a glitch in their system, and we always fix our glitches." He had erased me. With a single threat, he had erased my future, my name, and the 3 men I had loved so deeply that the only way I could protect them was to disappear. I had run. I had changed my identity. I had built a new life out of scrap metal and sheer paranoia, founding Apex Logistics from the ground up, hiding in plain sight. I had spent half a decade convinced that staying invisible was my only victory. But looking at my son, their son being silenced by the exact same invisible, suffocating power, I realized I was done running. I stepped away from Leo and walked over to the dining table. It was currently buried under stacks of physical blueprints, financial projections, and legal documents. I pulled a specific thick manila folder from the bottom of the pile and brought it back to the desk, tossing it down next to the keyboard. Leo looked up, his brow furrowed. "What is that?" "If an internet ghost cannot hurt them," I said, my voice steady, stripped of all the anxiety I had carried for 5 years, "then we do not fight them as ghosts anymore. We fight them in the daylight." On Wall Street. I opened the folder. It was the final bidding contract for the Department of Defense's new supersonic freight initiative. It was the biggest logistics contract of the decade, and for the last 6 months, it had been the crown jewel that Alexander Sebastian and Christian Sterling were desperately trying to secure. I picked up my pen. "They think they control the board because no one has dared to flip the table," I murmured, uncapping the heavy Mont Blanc. I pressed the ink to the paper and signed my legal name, Julian Vance, CEO of Apex Logistics, right on the dotted line. It was a direct declaration of war. It was corporate suicide. It was the most liberating thing I had ever done. I looked down at my son. "If they want to play dirty with algorithms, we hit them where they cannot hide." Leo looked at my signature, then up at me. A slow, terrifyingly brilliant smile spread across his face, a smile that was pure Christian warm, but utterly devastating. "Can I still break their toys?" he asked softly. I smiled back, feeling the ice in my veins turn to fire. "Break whatever you want, sweetheart." Leo turned back to his screen. He did not bother trying to bypass the social media filters this time. Instead, his fingers flew across the mechanical keys, pulling up a black command terminal. He typed out a string of executable code designed to quietly, maliciously flood Sterling Global's internal server routing. He paused, his finger hovering over the enter key. "For the 0 views," he whispered, and he pressed it. The conference room on the 84th floor of the Chrysler Building smelled of ozone expensive espresso and the sharp metallic tang of corporate bloodshed. I was not in the room. I was sitting in the adjacent surveillance suite separated from the main boardroom by a wall of one-way glass. At the massive oak table sat my Vice President of Operations, Big Mike Russo. Mike was 6'4", weighed 250 pounds, and had a neck tattoo of a flaming skull. He looked like a cartel enforcer. He was, in fact, a former golden retriever breeder who was currently wearing a discreet Bluetooth earpiece. On the other end of that earpiece, safely stationed in our Brooklyn loft, was my 5-year-old son. "He is sweating." Papa Leo's small, clinical voice echoed in my headset, overlapping with the audio from the boardroom. "His baseline heart rate is elevated. Tell Mike to hold the silence." "Hold the silence, Mike," I murmured into the mic. Beyond the glass, the heavy double doors swung open. The temperature in my small, dark room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My breath caught a sharp, involuntary spasm in my chest that I had spent half a decade trying to therapy away. It had been 5 years, but the Sterling brothers still moved like they owned the air they walked through. Alexander entered first, his charcoal suit immaculate, his expression the exact terrifying, quiet mask of absolute authority I used to wake up next to. Christian followed, soft around the edges, his golden brown eyes scanning the room with that sharp intuition that always saw too much. And finally, Sebastian. Lean, predatory eyes like chipped ice, carrying a stack of files like they were weapons. They had not changed. They had only sharpened. They took their seats opposite Big Mike. Sebastian did not even bother opening his folder. He just folded his hands, looked Mike dead in the eye, and began systematically tearing Apex Logistics' preliminary bid to shreds. He was brilliant. He was ruthless. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I watched Christian lean back, a faint, confident smile playing on his lips, while Alexander watched Mike with the stillness of an apex predator waiting for the prey to bleed out. Papa Leo said in my ear, his voice tight with profound 5-year-old annoyance, "The man with the ice eyes is using a false equivalence fallacy regarding our fuel supply chain. He is being stupid." "Tell him, Leo." I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs, caught somewhere between a panic attack and fierce pride. Through the glass, I saw Mike pause. He pressed a massive finger to his earpiece. He frowned. He looked at Sebastian. "Listen here, Suit Mike," rumbled his deep voice, bouncing off the glass walls. "Your fuel supply chain argument relies on a false equivalence fallacy. Furthermore," Mike paused, his brow furrowing deeper as he listened to Leo's rapid-fire dictation. He sighed heavily, clearly abandoning his professional filter. "Furthermore, you guys suck at this. Your numbers are boring. Give me my strawberry candy so I can take a nap." Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Sebastian actually stopped talking mid-sentence. His jaw snapped shut. Christian's confident smile melted into an expression of sheer, unadulterated bewilderment. Alexander blinked, staring at Big Mike as if the giant tattooed man had just started speaking fluent Aramaic. "What did you just say?" Sebastian demanded, his icy composure cracking for the very first time. "I said what the kid told me to say," Mike grumbled, crossing his massive arms. "I want my strawberry candy." It was a disaster. It was utterly ridiculous. And it was exactly what I needed to break their rhythm. "Stand down, Mike," I said into the mic. "I am coming in." I stood up, smoothing the front of my tailored navy suit. I took a slow, deep breath, bearing the terrified 22-year-old boy I used to be, deep down beneath layers of ice and scrap metal. I was Julian Vance now. I owned the board. I pushed open the connecting door and stepped into the light of the boardroom. "Gentlemen," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and chilled to absolute zero. "I apologize for my VP. Let us discuss the Department of Defense contract directly, shall we?" The reaction was immediate. It was violent. Sebastian's heavy Mont Blanc pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Christian stood up so fast his heavy leather chair tipped backward and crashed into the glass window. Alexander, the man who never moved unless he had calculated all possible outcomes, gripped the edge of the mahogany table so hard his knuckles turned bone white. They stared at me. All the power, all the predatory confidence they had brought into this room evaporated in a split second. Yun Christian whispered the old name tearing out of his throat like a physical wound. "My name is Julian Vance," I corrected him smoothly, walking to the head of the table. I did not look closely at their eyes. If I looked at their eyes, I would shatter. Instead, I looked at the contract. I opened my folder, sliding a revised bid across the mahogany table to Alexander. "Your routing model is inefficient. Alexander," I said, using his full name like a weapon. "You are bleeding a 10% margin on European airspace taxation. Apex Logistics has already secured the bypass rights. We are undercutting your bid by $40 million, and we are closing this deal today." They were not looking at the numbers. They were looking at me. They were looking at the tailored suit, the cold posture, the total absence of the fragile boy they had lost. Sebastian's chest was heaving. Alexander looked like a man who had just seen a ghost walk out of a burning building. "Julian, where have you?" Sebastian started, his voice cracking, taking a desperate step toward me. "This meeting is over," I interrupted, snapping my folder shut with a sharp sound that made them all flinch. "You lost the bid, Sterling. You have 24 hours to withdraw gracefully, or I will humiliate you in front of the Pentagon." I turned on my heel and walked out the door. Behind me, as the heavy wooden doors clicked shut, I heard the sound of the Sterling Empire descending into absolute panic. I heard Alexander shouting at his security detail, roaring orders to lock down the building, to pull every camera feed in a 10-mile radius to find out everything about Apex Logistics. I walked to the private elevator, my legs trembling so hard I could barely stand. "We got the contract," Papa Leo chirped in my ear. "Did you break their toys?" I leaned against the cool metal of the elevator wall, closing my eyes as the adrenaline crashed over me. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered into the empty car. "We broke them." The fallout from the boardroom was not a clean break. It was a siege. Over the next 14 days, the Sterling brothers suddenly developed a profound obsessive interest in the minutiae of Apex Logistics. They did not withdraw gracefully. Instead, they weaponized their corporate footprint to manufacture reasons to be in my orbit. Alexander initiated a sudden, aggressively polite series of cross-departmental integration meetings. Christian practically lived in the lobby of my building, bringing expensive artisanal coffees that I instructed my receptionist to throw into the trash while he watched. Sebastian sent legal inquiries that required my direct physical signature. I maintained a facade of absolute zero. I wore sharp suits, gave them nothing but monosyllabic answers, and looked at them as if they were slightly irritating strangers. I did not let them see my hands shake under the mahogany tables. I did not let them see how my chest ached every time Christian's golden eyes tracked my movements, looking for the boy he used to know. I was a fortress. But the real war, the actual unhinged theater of combat, was not happening in the daylight. It was happening at 1 a.m. on Reddit. "He is using ad hominem attacks," Papa Leo announced one night. I was standing in our kitchen nursing a glass of bourbon. I walked over to where my 5-year-old was perched on his ergonomic chair, illuminated by the glow of 3 monitors. On the screen was a Reddit thread in the R Global Logistics Forum. Under the handle, T-Rex Leo had just posted a brutal, meticulously cited breakdown of Sterling Global's carbon credit deficit. The first reply, posted a mere 40 seconds later by a user named Silverbullet S, read, "This analysis is garbage. You have no idea how corporate hedging works, you basement-dwelling troll. Show your face." That is definitely Sebastian, I noted, taking a sip of bourbon. No one else uses the word garbage with such aggressive punctuation. "He is very emotional," Leo observed coldly. His small fingers flew across his mechanical keyboard. "Your emotional dysregulation is showing, Silverbullet S. Perhaps you should drink some warm milk." In a penthouse across the river, I knew with absolute certainty that Sebastian Sterling, a man who commanded tens of thousands of employees, was currently losing his mind over a comment typed by a kindergartner in dinosaur pajamas. It was utterly surreal. The 3 most powerful alphas in New York City were spending their nights creating burner accounts to fiercely debate a 5-year-old internet ghost. They were spending millions on IT forensics to track T-Rex down, completely unaware that their elusive arch-nemesis was currently pausing his cyber warfare to ask me for a juice box. But Leo did not stop at internet trolling. He escalated. Beside his keyboard sat a small black moleskin notebook. Across the front, in neat, blocky letters, Leo had written survival capacity assessment. "What is this?" I had asked him when he first brought it out. "A stress test," Leo had replied simply. The stress tests were ingenious and deeply petty. On Tuesday, Leo hacked the Sterling Tower's internal elevator grid. He trapped Christian between the 40th and 41st floors for 45 minutes, looping a mariachi version of "My Heart Will Go On" through the intercom. On Thursday, he breached Alexander's heavily encrypted personal car GPS. Alexander, a man who mapped his commute down to the second, was rerouted into a 2-hour traffic jam that culminated at an abandoned clown supply warehouse in Queens. In his notebook, Leo carefully graded their reactions based on the audio feeds he tapped into. Christian cried a little at the song. Weak. Alexander did not swear, but clenched his jaw so hard I heard it crack. Impressive restraint. Pass. It should have been funny. It was funny. But underneath the comedy of errors, something else was happening. Something that terrified me. Despite being systematically tortured by a cyber phantom, and despite my absolute freezing rejection of them in the boardroom, the Sterlings were protecting me. Last Friday, Vanguard Shipping, a dirty, ruthless syndicate operating out of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, tried to run a smear campaign against Apex Logistics to sink our new DoD contract. Before I could even draft a legal response, Vanguard was annihilated. It was a massacre. Alexander weaponized Sterling Global's political leverage to freeze Vanguard's offshore accounts. Sebastian unleashed a swarm of corporate lawyers that shut down Vanguard's primary docks. Christian quietly bought out Vanguard's debt and called it in, bankrupting them in a single afternoon. They destroyed a multi-million-dollar company simply for looking at me wrong. They did not ask for credit. They did not even mention it. They just formed a silent, brutal perimeter around me, exactly the way they used to when I was 22 and overwhelmed by a crowded room. Standing in my office, reading the news of Vanguard's collapse, I felt the ice around my heart crack. The sharp, involuntary ache of missing them, a feeling I had spent 5 years trying to burn out of my chest, flared back to life, hot and devastating. I was losing my grip on my own anger. But while my walls were cracking, Leo was pushing too far. It happened on a Monday night. I was looking at the television in the living room, watching a live CNBC interview with Sebastian regarding Sterling Global's recent cybersecurity investments. "We have identified the signature of the hacker known as T-Rex," Sebastian said to the camera. His icy eyes seemed to pierce straight through the lens, his voice deadly and quiet. "It is no longer a game. You breached our internal financial mainframe. I do not care what rock you are hiding under. I'm going to find you, and I am going to tear your life apart." In the kitchen, Leo paused his typing. He looked at the TV. He looked down at his notebook. Then very slowly he smiled. Vanguard Shipping did not know how to die quietly. Despite the financial massacre the Sterlings had orchestrated, the remnants of Vanguard's leadership were desperate men who operated by the laws of the street, not the boardroom. When bankrupting them did not force Apex Logistics out of the DoD contract, they resorted to the only language they had left: intimidation. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was standing in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when my encrypted personal phone rang. The voice on the other end was gravelly and frantic, describing in graphic, violent detail exactly what they planned to do to my logistics hubs, my drivers, and finally to me if I did not withdraw my bid by midnight. I did not flinch. I calmly hung up the phone and blocked the number. But I was not the only one who had heard the call. I turned around to find Leo standing in the hallway. He was holding his favorite stuffed triceratops, but his small knuckles were white from gripping it so hard. His expression was completely blank. It was a terrifying kind of blankness, the exact chilling stillness Alexander possessed right before he dismantled an opponent's life. "They threatened you," Leo said. His voice did not shake. It was perfectly, unnervingly flat. "It is nothing I cannot handle, sweetheart," I said, wiping my hands on a towel and walking toward him. "It is just noise." "It is unacceptable," Leo replied. He turned on his heel, walked straight to his desk, and climbed into his oversized leather swivel chair. I should have stopped him. I should have unplugged the router. But the protective, fierce part of me, the part that had spent 5 years being hunted, was exhausted. I let him type. For the next 2 hours, the apartment was filled with the furious mechanical clatter of Leo's keyboard. He was not playing petty pranks on the Sterlings anymore. He had gone to war. He bypassed Vanguard's rudimentary security, tapping directly into the CCTV cameras of their illegal black site warehouses in Queens. He was compiling a massive data packet of their unregistered weapons manifest, preparing to dump it directly onto the FBI's public servers. But the file was too large. The encryption was too heavy. To push the data through in real time, Leo had to make a choice. Leo I warned, watching the terminal flash with unfamiliar command lines. "What are you doing to your firewall?" "I need more bandwidth," he muttered, his gray eyes locked on the screen. "I am dropping the tertiary proxies, just for 30 seconds. No, my blood ran cold. Leo stopped the transfer, the Sterling tracing algorithm. Enter. He hit the key. The data packet flew across the web, condemning Vanguard to federal prison. But the moment Leo's protective proxies dropped, a secondary window on his monitor violently flashed crimson. A loud, piercing alarm shrieked from the computer speakers. On the screen, a line of text rendered in stark white against the red background: "Target acquired. IP trace completed. Initiating physical intercept." Leo froze. His small hands hovered over the keyboard. "Papa," he whispered, the cold genius fading instantly, leaving only a 5-year-old boy who realized he had made a mistake. "They caught my ping." I looked at the screen. I looked at the IP address coordinates glowing brightly, pointing directly to our Brooklyn loft. For 5 years, my instinct had been to run. I had a go bag packed in the closet. I had a secondary identity ready. I could grab Leo, take the fire escape, and vanish into the night. My heart hammered against my ribs, screaming at me to survive, to hide. But I looked at my son trembling slightly in his dinosaur pajamas, and I realized that if I ran now, I would be running forever. I would be teaching him to be a ghost. "It is okay, sweetheart," I said, my voice dropping to a calm, steady whisper. I walked over and gently closed his laptop. "We are not running anymore." I poured myself a glass of bourbon. I sat on the edge of the sofa, and we waited. It took them exactly 22 minutes. The heavy, reinforced deadbolt of my front door did not even have a chance. It was violently kicked open, the wood splintering with a deafening crash that echoed through the quiet loft. They stormed in like a tactical strike force. Alexander was first, breathing heavily. His suit jacket discarded his slate-gray eyes, scanning the shadows with the lethal intensity of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. Sebastian flanked him, a vein pulsing in his neck, his jaw clenched tight enough to shatter bone. Christian was right behind them, his usual warmth replaced by a dark, volatile panic. They had come to destroy a cyber-terrorist. They had come to physically tear apart the anonymous hacker who had breached their fortress. Then the living room lights flickered on. Alexander's momentum halted so abruptly, it looked as though he had struck an invisible wall. Sebastian stumbled a step, his breath catching in his throat with a harsh, audible gasp. Christian froze, his golden eyes widening in sheer, unadulterated shock. They were looking at me. I was sitting on the sofa, a glass of bourbon in my hand, wearing a silk robe, looking back at them with absolute freezing calm. Julian Christian choked out the name, tearing from his lips like a prayer and a curse. Before any of them could take another step, a sound broke the silence. A loud slurping noise echoed in the room. It was a loud, deliberate, utterly unbothered sound. The 3 alpha billionaires slowly, mechanically turned their heads toward the glow of the computer desk. Sitting in the massive high-backed leather chair was a 5-year-old boy wearing green T-Rex pajamas. He was holding a small juice box, chewing thoughtfully on the red plastic straw. Leo looked at Alexander. He tilted his head, his slate-gray eyes a perfect, terrifying mirror of the man staring back at him, narrowing in calculated assessment. He released the straw with a soft pop. "You broke my door," Leo observed coldly, his aura projecting the exact imperious disdain of Sebastian Sterling. "You people have terrible manners." The silence in the loft was absolute, heavy enough to crush bone. The only sound was the faint hum of the computer tower and the steady, infuriatingly calm breathing of my 5-year-old son. Alexander, a man who regularly negotiated billions without blinking, looked as though the oxygen had been vacuumed from his lungs. He was staring at Leo's eyes, his own slate-gray eyes staring back at him from a face that was undeniably, terrifyingly a miniature version of his own. Christian let out a strangled sound, a broken, fractured exhale, his hands trembling at his sides. But it was Sebastian I watched. Sebastian, the coldest, the most ruthless of them all, the man who had sworn on national television to tear this hacker's life apart. He was staring at the boy in the dinosaur pajamas, his pristine logic completely short-circuiting. Julian Alexander breathed, his voice raw, taking a hesitant step forward. "He is he." That single step shattered my paralysis. 5 years of carefully constructed armor, 5 years of running, snapped into violent protective instinct. I did not walk. I moved with lethal speed, placing myself firmly between the 3 alphas and the leather chair. I became a human shield, my posture radiating absolute hostility. "Do not you dare take another step," I hissed, my voice dropping to a low, venomous register I did not know I possessed. "Do not you dare look at him like you have any right to." Young Christian pleaded, using the old name, a single tear cutting through the hardened lines of his face. "Please, 5 years. We looked for you everywhere. We thought you were dead. Why did you run?" The question ignited a fire in my chest. The anger I had buried under tailored suits and corporate acquisitions finally boiled over. Why did I run? I laughed, a bitter hollow sound that echoed off the brick walls. "I did not just run, Christian. I was evicted from your perfect world. You want to know why? Ask your father." The 3 of them froze. "Ask Richard Sterling." I spat, my voice shaking with rage. "Ask him about the blank check he slid across the mahogany desk. Ask him about the threat he made to systematically dismantle my life, my future, if I did not disappear. He told me I was a glitch in your system, and you were going to rule the world. So I took the glitch out of the code. I erased myself." The revelation hit them like a physical blow. I watched the realization dawn on their faces, the horrifying understanding that their own father, the patriarch they respected, had orchestrated the greatest tragedy of their lives. Alexander looked physically ill, the color draining from his face. Christian swayed, leaning heavily against the doorframe as if his legs could no longer support him. But Sebastian moved. He bypassed me, not with aggression, but with a slow, desperate reverence that completely disarmed my defenses. He stopped 2 feet from the leather chair. He looked at Leo, who was watching him with a calm, analytical gaze. Then Sebastian Sterling, the imperious, untouchable titan of Wall Street, slowly sank to his knees on my hardwood floor. His hands were shaking violently. He reached out, his long fingers hovering just inches from Leo's arm, terrified to make contact. Gently, so gently it broke my heart, he touched the inside of Leo's small wrist. Right there on the pale skin was a faint, crescent-shaped birthmark. The exact same mark Sebastian carried on his own wrist. A choked, agonizing sob tore out of Sebastian's throat. He bowed his head, his forehead resting against the armrest of Leo's chair, his shoulders shaking with the force of 5 years of repressed grief and sudden, blinding realization. Alexander dropped to his knees beside him, burying his face in his hands, completely undone. Christian fell to his knees on the other side, reaching out to grip my pant leg like a drowning man holding onto a lifeline, weeping openly. 3 billionaires, 3 apex predators, kneeling on my floor, completely shattered. They did not threaten. They did not demand custody. They did not mention lawyers. They just wept at the altar of the family they had lost and found. "I am sorry," Sebastian whispered, his voice completely wrecked, muffled against the chair. "I am so sorry, Julian. We did not know. If we had known, we would have burned his empire to the ground." I stood there, the anger draining out of me, replaced by a sudden terrifying exhaustion. I did not know how to fight men who surrendered so completely. From the chair, Leo let out a soft sigh. He picked up his black moleskin notebook from the desk and carefully uncapped a red pen. "You are crying," Leo observed, looking down at the 3 grown men kneeling around him. "It is very loud." He flipped open the notebook. "I have been tracking your metrics," Leo said smoothly, his voice echoing the boardroom authority of the men weeping before him. "You broke my door. You failed to secure your own IP firewalls. And your father is a bad man." He made a dramatic red checkmark on the paper. "You have failed 3 out of 5 of my survival capacity assessments," Leo announced, closing the book with a definitive snap. "You are on probation. You are not allowed to use the internet for a week. And you have to buy Papa a new door." Sebastian lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face wet with tears. But he looked at my 5-year-old son with a reverence usually reserved for deities. "Yes, sir," Sebastian rasped, his voice thick with emotion, bowing his head again. "Whatever you want, we accept." I leaned against the kitchen island, staring at the ceiling, feeling the heavy, frozen fortress around my heart finally irrevocably begin to melt. The scent of expensive cigars and old stagnant money tainted the sterile air of my corner office. When I pushed open the heavy glass doors on Friday morning, I did not find my assistant waiting with my espresso. Sitting behind my custom marble desk, looking exactly as imperious as he had 5 years ago, was Richard Sterling. My blood immediately turned to ice, my heart seizing in my chest. But the panic was short-lived, instantly replaced by a surge of homicidal protectiveness, because sitting on the leather sofa across the room, completely ignoring the billionaire patriarch, was Leo. My son was wearing a tiny tailored suit, his legs swinging idly as he typed away on his laptop, looking profoundly annoyed by the old man's presence rather than scared of him. A blank check did not work last time. Richard said, his voice a gravelly, condescending purr as he slid a thick manila folder across my marble desk. So let us try a different language. You hand over my grandson. You sign away your parental rights today. You take your little startup and you disappear to Europe. If you refuse Julian, I will use every federal connection I possess to bury you in SEC investigations until you die in a federal prison. 5 years ago, this man's shadow had eclipsed my entire world. 5 years ago, I would have suffocated on the terror. Now I just felt profoundly, utterly bored. I walked over, picked up the manila folder, and dropped it directly into the industrial shredder next to the desk. The loud, grinding noise filled the room, destroying his threats in seconds. You are sitting in my chair, Richard, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing, absolute zero. I leaned across the desk, bracing my hands on the cool marble. And your corporate espionage is tragically outdated. You think Apex Logistics is just a startup? Last night we secured the DoD contract. I am currently holding enough liquid capital to initiate a hostile takeover of Sterling Global's crumbling shipping division. If you threaten me or my son again, I will not just move to Europe. I will buy your legacy, dismantle it, and sell it for scrap. Richard's face contorted, an ugly purple rage flooding his features. He stood up, slamming his hand on the desk. You arrogant little glitch. He is not a glitch, father. The voice was like the crack of a whip. I turned to see the double doors swing violently open. Alexander stood there looking like a reaper in a bespoke charcoal suit. Beside him, Sebastian's icy eyes were completely dead, devoid of any familial warmth. Christian closed the door behind them with a soft, definitive click. Richard's sneer faltered. What is the meaning of this? You three are supposed to be in Tokyo. We canceled Tokyo, Alexander said, walking forward. He did not look at his father. He looked at me, his slate gray eyes silently, desperately asking for permission to step onto my battlefield. I gave him a fraction of a nod. Alexander tossed a heavy leather-bound folio onto the marble desk right over Richard's hands. Emergency board meeting, Sebastian stated, his tone chillingly clinical. Held at 6 o'clock this morning. We presented undeniable, meticulously tracked digital evidence of your embezzlement, your illegal lobbying, and your manipulation of Vanguard Shipping's offshore accounts. Christian stepped up beside me, placing himself slightly in front of me, forming a physical barrier between me and the man who had ruined my youth. The board voted unanimously, father. You are out. You are no longer chairman. You no longer have a seat on the board. You do not even have security clearance to the lobby. Richard looked like he was having a stroke. He scrambled for the folio, his hands shaking violently as he read the legally binding documents. You ousted me. Your own father. For him. No, Alexander corrected softly, his voice echoing with absolute finality. We ousted you for us. You took our family, so we took your empire. I hit the intercom button on my phone. Security. We have a trespasser in the CEO's office. Escort him out. When the guards dragged a screaming, cursing Richard Sterling out of my office, the silence that fell over the room was deafening. The Titan had fallen. The ghost that had haunted me for half a decade was finally exorcised. I turned to look at the three men standing in my office. They looked exhausted, their ties slightly loosened, the lethal adrenaline slowly draining from their postures. Alexander reached into his jacket and slowly slid another document across my desk. It was not a threat. It was a deed. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling for the first time that morning. It is everything, Sebastian answered. He stepped closer, his imposing, untouchable facade completely melting away. He looked at me with raw, undisguised vulnerability. Our personal shares. The majority holding of Sterling Global, the penthouses, the trust funds. We transferred it all to you and Leo, 100%. It is irrevocable. I stared at the thick stack of paperwork, my vision blurring with unshed tears. You gave me your entire empire. We do not want an empire, Christian whispered, tears pooling in his golden eyes, reaching out to gently touch my sleeve. We just want you. Sebastian took a shaking breath and slowly fell to one knee, right there in the middle of my corner office, completely ignoring the glass walls where half my executive floor could see. Alexander and Christian silently dropped to their knees beside him. Wealth, our lives, and 5 years of atonement, Sebastian rasped, his voice breaking entirely. We are not trying to buy you, Julian. We are surrendering. We are begging for a home. Please, let us come home. The heavy, frozen fortress I had built around my heart finally violently shattered. A choked, agonizing sob tore out of my throat. I sank to my knees on the floor in front of them, gripping Sebastian's lapels, burying my face in his shoulder. Immediately, 3 pairs of strong, familiar arms wrapped around me, pulling me into a desperate, crushing embrace. 5 years of running, of surviving, evaporated into the scent of cedar bergamot and rain. I was finally allowed to stop being strong. A soft sound made us open our eyes. Leo had climbed down from the sofa. He walked over to where the 4 of us were tangled together on the floor weeping. He held his black moleskin notebook in one hand and his red pen in the other. He looked at Alexander, Christian, and Sebastian. You got rid of the bad man Leo observed clinically, and you gave Papa all your money so he never has to be scared again. That is statistically a very acceptable apology. He uncapped the red pen with his teeth. He made a large, dramatic mark on the page, the sound scratching loudly in the quiet room. He closed the book with a definitive snap. Pass, Leo announced. The sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse was blindingly bright, casting long golden geometric shapes across the hardwood floors. For 5 years, my mornings had been defined by the harsh, fluorescent glow of a Brooklyn kitchen and the terrifying, heavy silence of survival. Now my morning was defined by absolute multi-billion-dollar chaos. I leaned against the massive white marble island, nursing a double espresso, and watched the 3 most ruthless apex predators on Wall Street get systematically dismantled by a kindergartner. The knot is asymmetrical, Leo stated. He was standing on a velvet ottoman wearing his new private school uniform. Alexander, a man who regularly executed hostile takeovers with the precision of a neurosurgeon, was currently sweating through his custom Tom Ford dress shirt. His hands that controlled global shipping lanes were trembling slightly as he tried for the 4th time to tie a tiny navy blue necktie. It is a half Windsor, Leo. Alexander reasoned, his voice tight with a level of stress I had not seen him exhibit during federal audits. It is supposed to have a slight structural bias. It is sloppy, Leo replied, clinically not breaking eye contact. Passable for a mid-level manager, unacceptable for my neck. Alexander actually closed his eyes and took a deep, centering breath. Right. Of course. Let us try the full Windsor again. From the kitchen stove, a sudden ominous hissing noise was followed by the sharp smell of charred butter. Damn it, Christian muttered frantically, waving a silicone spatula at a cloud of gray smoke. He looked over his shoulder, his golden eyes wide and panicked. Julian, the induction stovetop is actively working against me. I swear the heat calibrates differently than the manual states. You said it to sear, Chris. I pointed out, mildly taking a sip of my espresso. You are trying to cook a French omelet, not a ribeye. I can salvage it, Christian insisted, scraping the black and rubbery mass onto a pristine porcelain plate. He hurried over and slid it onto the island in front of the ottoman. Here we go. High protein. Perfectly edible. Leo looked down at the plate. He slowly pulled his black moleskin notebook from his uniform blazer pocket. No, wait. Christian pleaded, his imposing physique instantly wilting. He reached out to cover the notebook. Do not take out the red pen, Leo. I will order from Balthazar. I will buy Balthazar. Just give me a C- for effort. While Christian negotiated for his life over a burnt egg, Sebastian marched into the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. His icy eyes were narrowed into daggers, his voice a lethal freezing whisper that usually made junior executives cry. I do not care if the Swiss delegation is already in the air, David Sebastian snarled into the receiver. Reroute them to London, delay the merger, tell them I am indisposed. If you schedule a board meeting during my son's kindergarten orientation ever again, I will personally dissolve your pension. Am I understood? He hung up, tossing the phone onto the sofa with a sharp exhale. He walked over to the kitchen island, and the lethal corporate aura instantly evaporating the second he looked at me. He stepped into my space, wrapping his long arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin heavily on my shoulder. He smelled of cedar and expensive cologne, but underneath it, he just smelled like home. My assistant is an idiot, Sebastian mumbled against my neck, pressing a soft kiss just below my jawline. Good morning. Good morning, I whispered back, leaning back into his solid warmth. Christian quickly abandoned his ruined omelet, coming around to wrap an arm around my shoulders, pressing his lips to my temple. A second later, Alexander, having finally achieved a mathematically perfect tie knot, stepped up his hand, gently cupping the back of my neck, his thumb stroking my pulse point. I stood there in the center of their gravity, surrounded by them, breathing them in. The fortress I had spent 5 years building was not gone. It had just been repurposed. It was not meant to keep them out anymore. It was meant to keep us safe together. Papa Leo called out. I opened my eyes, looking at my son. Yes, sweetheart. My algorithms are returning irregular data, Leo said. He was holding his custom tablet, tapping the screen with a small frown. The video I made, the one they suppressed. My heart skipped a beat. I untangled myself from the alphas and walked over to look at the screen. It was the YouTube and Reddit upload. The video that had received 0 views. The video that had started this entire war a month ago. It did not have 0 views anymore. The counter was spinning so fast it was blurring. 2 million, 3 million, 5 million views. What did you do? I asked, looking up at the 3 men who had suddenly gone very, very quiet. Alexander cleared his throat, adjusting his cufflinks. Transparency is the foundation of a healthy corporate restructure. I scrolled down to the comment section. Pinned at the very top, bearing the verified blue check marks of the 3 chairmen of the newly minted Vance Sterling Global, were 3 identical comments. Official statement from Alexander Sebastian and Christian Sterling. We formally apologize to the user T-Rex. Your supply chain analysis was flawless. Our firewalls were inadequate. Please do not trap us in the elevator again. We surrender. I stared at the screen. I looked at the 3 most powerful billionaires in the hemisphere who were currently blushing like reprimanded schoolboys under the critical gaze of a 5-year-old. A sound bubbled up in my chest. It started as a small tremor shaking my shoulders before tearing out of my throat as a full, breathless, echoing laugh. I laughed until my eyes watered, leaning against the marble counter for support. 5 years ago, I was a glitch they tried to erase. Today, my son and I own the entire system. Leo looked at the millions of views. He looked at the 3 alphas. He uncapped his red pen, opened his notebook, and with a flourish, drew a massive, glittering gold star. Acceptable, Leo announced. And, for the first time in my life, looking at my strange, brilliant, chaotic family, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never have to run again.